Jasmine never expected that one simple action would change her life forever. When she stood up for Steph Curry at a small diner, she didn't just face criticism. She lost her job as well. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Did Jasmine truly get the opportunity she deserved after all the hardships? This story is not only about courage. It shows us that sometimes, standing up for what's right opens doors to unexpected opportunities. The evening shift at Riverside Diner was a familiar routine for Jasmine, a 25-year-old waitress with a warm smile and the ability to make every customer feel special. Nestled in a quiet park in the small town of Berkeley, San Francisco, Riverside was a go-to spot for older locals who came for pie, coffee, and to chat about the past while watching their favorite basketball games. For Jasmine, the diner wasn't just a job. It was where she found peace, a place where she knew everyone by name. But tonight, that rhythm was about to change. When the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new arrival, Jasmine glanced up, thinking it was another regular. But her heart skipped a beat when she saw who was walking in. It was Steph Curry, the Golden State Warriors star, one of the most famous athletes in the world. Steph was a legend in San Francisco, home of the Warriors. Jasmine froze, unable to believe her eyes. He was dressed casually in a hoodie and sneakers, seemingly trying to avoid attention. But even in simple clothes, his presence filled the room. The older customers at the bar turned to stare, whispering amongst themselves, some even leaning forward, trying to confirm if it was really him. Jasmine's heart raced. She had seen him play on TV countless times, but she never imagined he would walk into her tiny diner. Known for her bright smile and attentive service, Jasmine had worked at Riverside Diner for 3 years, learning the menu and the habits of regulars. Steph's arrival was a big deal, both for her and the regulars, all of whom were die-hard fans. Once she collected herself, Jasmine approached his table with her usual warm demeanor. "Hello, what can I get you today?" Steph smiled kindly, his eyes radiating warmth that made her feel at ease. "Just a black coffee and a slice of whatever pie you have." "Coming right up," Jasmine responded, her voice steady even though her stomach was full of butterflies. She turned back to the counter, hearing the whispers from the regulars. Some were smiling in disbelief, others shaking their heads, still in awe. When she placed the coffee and pie in front of Steph, she fought to keep her composure. "Here you go. Enjoy." "Thank you," Steph said, flashing another smile before looking out the window. Jasmine couldn't take her eyes off him for a moment. There was something so simple about Steph. Even though he was famous, he seemed contemplative, almost weary. But not everyone shared her admiration. Todd, a regular customer and die-hard Sacramento Kings fan, known for his blunt opinions and occasional harsh criticism, couldn't hide his disdain. Jasmine was thrilled to serve a star like Curry. She admired not only his basketball talent, but also his charitable efforts. However, when Todd stood up and walked over to Curry's table, her excitement quickly shifted to anxiety. "Excuse me, you're the basketball player, right?" Todd's voice broke the quiet atmosphere of the diner. Steph looked up, offering a polite smile. "Yes, that's me." Todd crossed his arms, his face twisted in skepticism. "I've read about you. You make millions, but what have you really done for people who need help? I hear you're not exactly generous with that money." The accusation hung in the air. Jasmine, who had been clearing a nearby table, froze, her eyes shifting to Curry as she watched his reaction. "I always try to help when I can," Curry responded calmly. "I've supported educational programs, built basketball courts for kids, and funded charitable organizations." Todd scoffed. "Sounds like PR to me. You guys are just building your image." Whispers spread across the diner as people began discussing the confrontation. A few patrons nodded in agreement. Jasmine felt a surge of anger. Todd's words were unfair and ignorant, and she couldn't just stand by while someone she admired was being criticized like that. Gathering all her courage, she stepped forward. "Todd," she said, her voice firm despite the anxiety building inside her. "That's not true. Steph Curry has done more than most people can imagine. He's given scholarships to students who can't afford college, supported disaster victims, and backed mental health programs." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Todd narrowed his eyes, his tone filled with doubt. "Do you believe all that?" How do you know he's not just doing it for the headlines? Because actions speak louder than words, Jasmine replied, her voice growing stronger. I've read about the kids whose lives have been changed because of his charity. He doesn't have to do it, but he does because he truly cares. Curry looked at her, his expression one of surprise and gratitude. Jasmine continued, her voice more confident. We live in a world where those who have the power don't always stand up, but when someone like Steph does, it's not fair to tear them down. The diner buzzed with murmurs. Some patrons seemed moved by her defense, while others remained skeptical. Todd snorted and returned to his seat, muttering under his breath. But what had happened couldn't be erased. Jasmine saw Mr. Carter, the diner owner, walk out from the kitchen, his face darkened. Jasmine, he called coldly, motioning for her to come over. She walked toward him, her heart heavy. What were you thinking? He asked in a low voice. You can't argue with customers, especially regulars like Todd. I wasn't arguing, Jasmine replied, her voice trembling. I just stood up to defend someone who didn't deserve to be treated that way. Mr. Carter shook his head, disappointment written all over his face. This is a job, not a place for debates. Todd and the other regulars are the backbone of this diner. If they're not happy, we lose their loyalty. I can't let that happen. I think it's best if you find another job. His words hit her like a punch to the stomach. You're firing me just because I defended someone? She asked, stunned. I'll give you a few days to find a new job, Mr. Carter said, his tone final. Jasmine felt her vision blur as tears started to well up, but she held her head high, refusing to crumble in front of him. She glanced at Curry, who was standing up and watching their exchange with a regretful expression on his face. I'm sorry, Curry said softly as she walked past, gathering her things. Thank you for standing up for me. You didn't have to do that, but it really meant a lot. Jasmine nodded, forcing a weak smile. It's nothing. The next morning, Jasmine woke up feeling like her world was collapsing. The sense of excitement that usually accompanied the start of a new day was gone, replaced by a deep sense of loss. She had always loved her job at Riverside Diner, the familiarity with regular customers, and the calm rhythm of brewing coffee and serving pancakes. But now, the shame from last night still lingered, having been fired simply for defending someone she admired. She couldn't believe Mr. Carter had fired her so easily, nor could she forget the look in the eyes of the regulars when they had glanced at her. Their silent judgment cut deeper than Todd's words ever could. Jasmine can feel the weight in her chest, making it hard to breathe. The events of the previous night kept replaying in her mind, like a relentless loop. Riverside Diner had been her sanctuary for years, a second home filled with laughter and warmth. But in just a few minutes, it was all gone. All because she couldn't stand by and watch someone, even a famous athlete like Steph Curry, be bullied. She had always thought that doing the right thing mattered, but now she wasn't so sure, because it seemed like the world didn't care about right or wrong. Still, life had to go on. Rent was due, and bills needed to be paid. Jasmine reluctantly prepared herself to return to the diner one last time, to collect her final paycheck. The mere thought of stepping into that space, facing familiar faces, twisted her stomach with anxiety. She could already hear the whispers, feel the disapproving stares around her, but she had no other choice. She needed the money to survive until she found something new. That morning, the fresh air of San Francisco blew gently in the breeze, the golden light of the rising sun casting its glow over the city. But Jasmine couldn't feel any of it. Her heart was heavy, and her mind was clouded. She told herself to hold her head high, no matter what lay ahead. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She had spoken the truth, even though it was difficult. As she approached Riverside Diner, a sleek black SUV pulled up right in front of the diner. The luxury car stood out against the diner's aging backdrop, catching her off guard. She paused for a moment, confused, then pushed open the door. The familiar atmosphere of the diner was gone today, replaced by a heavy silence. Jasmine couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Steph Curry sitting comfortably in a corner. Even though he was dressed simply in a hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap, he exuded a quiet confidence that no one could miss. Behind the counter, Mr. Carter stood frozen, his face a mix of confusion and anxiety. The regulars sat in silence, their eyes shifting back and forth between Steph and Jasmine, the tension in the air palpable enough to slice through with a knife. Jasmine! Steph stood as she entered, his voice warm and calm. Can we talk for a moment? Jasmine's heart hammered in her chest, but she nodded and walked over. She could feel the weight of everyone's attention on her, but this time, she didn't care. Following Steph to a table, she sat across from him, trying to stay composed even though her mind was in turmoil. I can't stop thinking about what happened last night, Steph began, his voice gentle but sincere. You stood up for me when you didn't have to, and I respect you more than words can say. Jasmine blinked, unsure how to respond. I just thought you deserved someone to stand up for you, she said softly, her voice trembling. And that's exactly why I'm here, Steph said, leaning forward, his eyes locked on hers. You did something incredibly brave, and that shows what kind of person you are. A person who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's rare, and I admire it deeply. Jasmine tilted her head, her mind a whirlwind, unable to fully process his words. I don't understand, she said, her voice choking. Steph smiled, his face both resolute and kind. My foundation is expanding. We're launching new programs to help underprivileged kids, improve educational opportunities, and create second chances for those who need them. We need people who are passionate about making a difference, people like you. Jasmine's throat tightened, her eyes welling up. Are you serious? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Absolutely, Steph replied without hesitation. I want you to join our team. It's not a waitressing job, but it's an opportunity to be part of something bigger, to use your voice and heart to help others. Jasmine sat there, speechless, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She couldn't believe it. Tears began to fall as the reality set in. She had lost her job, but in return, she was being offered an opportunity that far surpassed anything she'd ever imagined. She whispered, her voice breaking, I don't know what to say. Just say yes, Steph said, flashing a bright smile that made her laugh through her tears. Jasmine nodded, tears streaming down her face as she smiled brilliantly. Yes, absolutely. Steph extended his hand, and she shook it, sealing the deal. Around them, the diner remained silent, the regulars who had once criticized her now sitting motionless, their eyes wide with surprise and a hint of respect. Mr. Carter stood stiffly behind the counter, his teeth clenched, his expression tinged with regret, but Jasmine didn't mind. She kept her gaze forward, where a future full of possibility awaited. Steph stood to leave, pausing to look back at Jasmine, his eyes filled with sincerity. I'll have someone from my team reach out to you today to get everything started. Thank you again for what you did. It means more than you realize. The doorbell rang as he stepped out, the sound echoing through the diner like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Jasmine sat still for a moment, trying to steady her breathing, then stood up, a sense of resolve settling in her heart. She walked to the counter to collect her final paycheck. Mr. Carter handed her the envelope, his face showing clear signs of regret. I feel like you shouldn't have done what you did last night, he said, his voice tight. But I'm sorry for how I treated you. Jasmine looked at him calmly. You taught me a valuable lesson, she replied firmly. Sometimes, standing up for what's right is worth more than staying silent to keep a job. She turned and walked out, the warm sunlight hitting her face, her heart light, filled with hope. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine joined Steph Curry's foundation and fully immersed herself in work that was meaningful and fulfilling. She visited underserved communities, helped organize educational programs, and met countless individuals whose lives had been changed through her efforts. For the first time in her life, she felt that her voice and actions truly mattered. Looking back, Jasmine realized that losing her job at Riverside Diner wasn't the end, as she had once feared, but the beginning of a life full of purpose. Just one chance meeting with Steph Curry had changed everything, proving that sometimes standing up for what's right opens the door to a brighter future. This story truly makes us reflect on the power of courage and sacrifice. Jasmine faced great loss, but in the end, she found an invaluable opportunity that many could only dream of. Have you ever stood up for what's right, even when faced with difficulty? If this story resonates with you, don't hesitate to share it with friends and loved ones. Together, let's spread the message of perseverance, courage, and the chance to make a difference. Thank you so much for your continued support of the channel. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. During the content creation process, there may have been some small mistakes, and we hope you'll kindly overlook them. Wishing everyone happiness, peace, and good health in life. Stay tuned for more.